Hello, WordNerds! Happy Sunday and welcome back to our live chat. This is a topic that I was super excited to talk about because today we are jumping into the realities of the publishing world, all corners of it, traditional publishing, self-publishing, getting ready for publishing. We just want to talk about some of the things that maybe not everyone realizes comes with the package of aiming towards being a published author in any way, shape, or form. So to start this off on a more positive note, we are going to jump in with an initial question of what is your personal idea of success as an author? And then we will go from there. So Erin, how about you?
Well, I am taking the route of hybrid author. So that means I'm trying to publish traditionally and have my own self-published works out there that I control 100%. So, I mean, I guess the question is, what point do you reach and you're like, I'm a success? And for me, that would probably be books on shelves. And I think the ultimate success would be like, I mean, there's so many different things, but actually being able to go to, like, say, a book signing and have people show up. So not sit there and go, where is everybody? That would be my ultimate success. Yeah.
How about you, Emma?
Angie Thomas.
Okay.
Her experience.
Way to shoot high.
That's like ultimate success. It's what she had for her debut book. It's like a 13 house auction, 8-star reviews. Did you see the line at her like launch party?
Oh my god.
But a more serious one. The more I like learn about publishing and like how hard it can be and everything, my like goal is just to earn out my advance in like a decent amount of time, not in like 10 years. Like, you know, to actually earn out the advance that the publishers give you. I feel like that gives you an edge in like publishing in the future and everything when it shows that you're like reliable and are actually going to earn the money that they think you're going to earn. So
that's a pretty good goal.
That's a very good goal.
And then you start getting royalty checks. So
yeah. Kyra?
Well, let's see. So my goals aren't really monetary related since I have like another career. So, but just like, I guess having books that people read, I get like on shelves, I think kind of like Erin, it'd be cool to have people show up at a book signing. On the more like unrealistic level, like I've been noticing like really like big YA names have like coloring books, and I think that'd be sweet.
Yes.
To have like a coloring book of your book.
Megan?
I have my like immediate success is gonna be seeing my book on a shelf somewhere or in a library somewhere. And then my like reach, know I've made it success is gonna be when I'm at a place career-wise where I don't have to worry as much about whether a publisher is gonna pick up my next book. Like if I have sold enough and like am making publishers enough money, fans, that I'm gonna be able to either just keep getting book deals or be able to start self-publishing and make enough sales to have a career there.
I think what initially had me thinking about this question is that months and months ago, I think it was me, Megan, and Erin talking either in a post chat or a writing group or something about like how you guys would be totally okay. You'd love to be like John Green or J.K. Rowling of the big fans and like insanity over your books, whereas I have no interest in that. Like the author I would most want to be is a self-published author named Bella Forrest, who almost no one has heard of, but she's one of the top 10 best-selling authors on Amazon. She is making tons of money, and nobody even knows who she really is. I would love to be that. But
yeah, I want to be like Maureen Johnson levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where everyone just thinks you're really cool. That's what I want. Maureen Johnson, people think she's so cool that she's having like a cruise right now. Like that people went on a cruise to go with her. Like that's cool.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Okay, the other author who's like, I was gonna say career I would steal, but just her whole life pretty much is Maggie Stiefvater, because I'm just like, you are like my goal in life. Like I want to be you. She has like the perfect career, like, and her books are like that beautiful balance between like super commercial and gorgeous writing. And then she's just like such a cool person. If you watch, like, I'm sounding really obsessive, Maggie Stiefvater. But if you watch her videos, she's just very cool and like very chill, whereas it'd just be like a jittering. Like,
She has a beautiful office too. Like her writing office is really pretty.
And she has goats.
Yes, she has like a house like in the country with like all this land and stuff. It's great.
And she has cars, cool cars. Yeah, I mean.
Well, I was also thinking about Maggie Stiefvater. There was somebody who was tweeting recently. I don't remember who it was or exactly what they were saying, but they were basically talking about how like you need to be conscious of, you know, like the rules of writing and like trends and what's going to sell and what isn't and stuff. And basically the person said something about like, you know, people like Maggie Stiefvater, and they named a couple other people, can basically write whatever books they want to write and it's going to get published because like people like them enough. And I'm like, yes. So be like Maggie Stiefvater, like, I wrote this cool book, and people are like, okay, we'll read it no matter what it is.
Yeah.
You literally write whatever. Maggie Stiefvater literally like jokes about stuff like ridiculous books that she would write. What was it? Oh, it was a tweet that was like, in which she writes a book about where are all these people's parents anyways. That was the book. It's like a joke. It's a joke, and everyone's like, where can I buy it? And I'm like, you guys, joking.
Yeah. I would love to have my books well known enough that at book events or in a bookstore people would recognize me, but nowhere else. I don't want to get recognized at the supermarket. Only
I one time was at a book signing. I was at a book signing once and I got mistaken for Kira Cass.
I'm so not surprised.
I'm not surprised at all.
Remind me of her. No.
It was funny because I was just like, I don't even remember like whose signing it was, but I was like at the table where you can buy the book to get it like so that the person can sign it later. And this girl like has her back to me and she kind of turns around and she just like jumps back. And I kind of like look at her like thinking like, what did I do? Like she's scared and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I stuck with Kira Cass for a bit there.
You do. The first time I met you, I thought that you looked like her and like talked like her a little bit too, actually.
A picture of Kira.
High compliments.
Yeah, you just gotta put your hair in a bun with like a cute bow in front of it, and you'll be perfect. You'll be good to go.
I do that not infrequently.
For those of you who don't know what she looks like.
It's so pixelated.
Kira Cass. Dang it!
They can look it up. But yeah, if you had your hair in like a super high bun, you would definitely like super look like her.
Also, I want to be that author that everyone like envies their like fashion sense, but that will probably never happen for me. But I want
Tahara Mafi.
Yeah, like Tahara Mafi.
Her Instagram is just. I love it so much. I'm such an author stalker. Seriously, like Maggie Stiefvater and Tahara Mafi, Tahara Mafi's husband, Random Riggs. I'm like, I'd ship you. You're so cute together.
All right, so I think for today's discussion, we're going to kind of work our way up through the publishing process, starting with how you know when your book is ready to like take that next step into seriously considering either publishing it yourself or having it published through a publishing house and querying agents and all of that. So it can be hard to know just based on you reading your own book, baby, when it is ready. So, and the reality is not all books that their authors think are ready are actually ready to make that leap. So any advice on how to know?
I'm going to go for a sec because I think that particularly it's a little easier for people that are going the traditional route. And I don't mean easy. It's still heart-wrenching and terrible at times. But like, you know when your books start to become close to ready because instead of getting the flat-out rejection from agents, you get a no, but let me see something later, your next book, or you get a revise and resubmit request. Like that was how I started, because you know the first couple books I queried were terrible. Like when I look back on them, I know they're terrible, but at the time I thought they were, pretty good. And I was just getting rejections. I wasn't getting personal feedback. I wasn't getting any requests for revisions. And it wasn't until like book 3 that I started getting actual interest, even though they weren't yeses. And I think that's when you start to know that you're not necessarily there yet, but you're close.
And it's okay to, like, you're probably going to query a book that isn't ready, and, you know, that's not the end of the world.
Most definitely.
Not saying you should, like, just go out on query, like, anything. Like, it should be the best that you can make it at that time, but the best you can make it right now is not going to be the best that you can ever make a book in the future.
Normally, like, almost as a rule, most authors query a few books before they find the one that actually goes somewhere. Because, I mean, it's not like, it's like playing, you know, having a few musical, you know, violin lessons and then being like, well, I'm going to go join the orchestra now. No, you have a few more years of practice ahead of you. You know, writing is not any easier than learning to play an instrument, and people seem to think that it should be for some reason.
I'll also say, like, if you aren't quite sure if you should query or if you're just looking into self-publishing it, sorry, I shouldn't say just, but if you're looking into self-publishing it, I will say that, like, so I haven't queried, but having beta read other people's books, I find that a book that is better and more ready, I'm able to make more comments on. Like, when something just flat out isn't the writer's best work, or it's not something that is ready, like, I feel like it's hard to really give good feedback on something when you're like, really, this book just isn't ready, you know? So maybe, like, keep an eye out for that, like, the kind of critiquing you're getting when it's getting to, like, smaller details, and that's when your books are getting better, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
That's a hard one, I think, because it's hard to know if you're self-publishing. It's hard to know because, you know, you don't have that indication from literary agents. And a lot of the time, a beta reader isn't actually going to be like, let me crush your dreams and tell you that you just aren't ready. So, like, I don't know, maybe Kelly will have insight into this, like, because I've only self-published one book so far, and Kelly's more of a veteran than me, but how you would know when, say, like, my first book or my second book is it ready? Or should I write another one and hold off?
Part of it is there's no hard and fast answer. Like, a lot of it is going to be just being realistic with yourself, comparing your work to other books in the genres that you're looking to publish in, and see if you're getting to that same level of immersive. It's hard, but part of it as well is when you're self-publishing, you're just like as if you were going to traditional publish, you're not going to make this book perfect on your own. There are a lot of editors you can hire out who will give you, before you even hire them on, give you an assessment of how thorough an edit your book really needs in order to be published. So there's going to be, you can spend a lot of money and get like months worth of developmental edits and even go through the outlining process with an editor, and they will take you all the way through, or you're just looking at like a proofread to polish it because you've made it strong enough on its own. And unfortunately, there really is no hard and fast rule here for self-publishing, because a lot of authors still get it wrong. A lot of books get out there that aren't ready. So there's no easy answer on this, but getting involved in the writing community, talking to other authors, reading other books that are self-published, that are traditionally published, to get a sense of where you really need to be. It's going to make you a better writer regardless, but it'll make it easier to be honest with yourself about where your book is and what kind of help it needs. So
yeah, I think reading, like you said, is super, super key. And it's not like you wouldn't have already been reading before that, but some of the people that are like writer friends that I have beta read for, and that were going on to self-publish, you know, years back, nobody I know now, in case you're wondering, but, you know, in particular, a few that would be like full of tropes. And I'm like, I don't think this is ready because it's just so full of tropes. And to me, that person had not read enough, you know, YA, for example. Like, because if they had, they would know that it was all just one big trope, right? And maybe you should rework things a little bit, right? But I also didn't want to be that person that was like, this isn't ready, you know, because that sucks to tell someone that. Oh, we lost Emma.
Well, and it's way worse to say, like, oh, the entire premise of your book is actually just
right.
Like,
how do you say that to
right,
someone,
like,
right?
Just write a different book, right? No one wants to say that.
But that's kind of what they be told sometimes.
Right. Well, and I'd say that, like, maybe it's not even a sign that they haven't read enough in the genre, because when you're writing, like, I think you very much start out doing this imitation thing where,
Yes.
you know, if you've read a lot of chosen one books, then that's what you're most likely to write.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, most people can say their first book was like, my book was like a really bad version of, like, insert really popular title here. So, like, my first book was like a really bad version of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, so was mine, definitely. Like a weird Lord of the Rings Star Wars mashup. Yeah, and I'm glad that I didn't even have like a laptop then. I was too young to be on the internet. Well, I feel so old saying this, but the internet wasn't like it wasn't the way it is now. And I definitely didn't have the resources to figure out how to start querying when I was like 16 or whatever. And I'm so glad I didn't, because man, looking back at the stuff I wrote, I mean, not bad for how old I was, but not anywhere near ready to be sent anywhere or to be published online. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Not that you can't take it down. It's not like it's irreversible, but yeah.
The internet is forever.
Well, if people are weird and take screenshots of your self-published books, then I guess so, but you can take it down.
Well, and I know at least, like, when I was interning at the literary agency, like, occasionally I would get a query from someone who would say, like, oh, I'm 16 in their query letter, and, like, the books were not ready for the most part, but I, like, just thought it was so cute that, you know, like, I wish I was doing that at 16, because that's, I think, really brave.
That's
at
amazing.
that age to be like, yeah, I'm
They
going to
know
be a
what they
writer and
want.
put your book out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And your
Well,
age is not going to preclude you from being able to publish a book. Like, if your book is ready and you are 16, they will publish it. I mean, look at Cody Keplinger's The Duff. She was still in high school when that came out. So, like,
and it's important to, you know, when you're that. Sorry, say that again. I interrupted you.
Oh, oh no, I just finished off by saying, like, so if you're really young or much older, like, as long as the book is there, they're not going to care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, like Kyra's saying, when I was reading for the, when I read for the agency, occasionally, very occasionally, there'll be someone younger, but more often on Wattpad, I'll get a message from someone that will be 12 or 13. How do I publish my book? And I don't want to say, you know, wait, because I kind of do, but like, you might have to wait is usually what I say. But like, don't be discouraged, because it takes years to develop your voice. And even if you write something now at, say, 15 or 16, it's not a waste of time, for one, because you're honing your skills, and two, a lot of authors will go back and they'll take works that they've written at 16 or 13 and they will redo them and they'll publish them. So 16-year-old you might feel a bit impatient, but that story you're working on now might be something you come back to and does end up getting published later. So,
fun fact,
kind of encouraging,
that I learned from reading the Hamilton this week, in the song from Hamilton, The Story of Tonight. The melody was taken from a song that Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote when he was 16 years old.
That's so cool.
Like, that stuff sticks with you, and it's gonna be important to you as your career progresses.
Yeah.
No kidding. That's so cool. I love hearing stuff like that. Yeah,
So-
I'd love to go back and grab something that I wrote at 16 and be like, hey, 16-year-old me, I'm using this. It wasn't a waste.
All right. So a lot of you guys have experience with reading query letters and all of that for agencies. Stepping away from age and whatnot, how often would you say you're seeing books that just aren't ready versus books that aren't necessarily a good fit? Like, there's so many different reasons that an agent won't pick something up, but in
So many.
some cases, yeah.
90%.
Yeah, so yeah, it's like, and not that we didn't also get a lot of really good queries when I was interning, but man, we got so many that were so bad.
Mm.
And like, some too that, I mean, if you're sending a query that, like, to an agency that only reps like Kidlit, and you're sending like your, you know, sci-fi erotica, then like, that's obviously like, that's bad. And sometimes there were things that it's like I know when I was interning, the agent I was interning for said she wasn't really looking for fairy tale retellings, And so I turned down a few really, really good fairy tale retellings because that's not what she was looking for. A couple of which I know have gotten picked up by other agents who were looking for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there are a lot
Oh,
of really
yeah.
bad
I mean,
queries, I think is where I was going with
yeah,
that.
there are tons. The funny thing is, as it almost sounds discouraging, but the funny thing is it should be actually it should be encouraging, because the ones that are good stand out. Because you get so many terrible ones that I normally the A+B works that Kyra and I both intern for doesn't ask for pages. Sometimes they attach pages anyways, or not attach but paste them in anyways, and I don't mind that usually. But usually we just get a query, and that really changes things because I can't just scroll down. It's totally just based on the query, and a lot of them, like Kyra said, they're not good queries. So when somebody gets something that is a good query, they've done their research, and I'll request, because I'm going, this is head and shoulders above everyone else in this inbox, because they've just on research alone, because I can just tell that they've done their research, they got the name right, it is YA or middle grade. They're not trying to sell me like you said, they're sci-fi erotica. So, and if something catches my eye, even if the query isn't perfect, you still request it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an advantage.
I have some numbers here that I pulled. I have a huge list of articles for anyone who wants further reading on this. I'll post it in the discussion as time is going on. But I have these numbers from Susie Townsend, who is a very big agent at New Leaf Literary Agency. This is from 2013, so she was still a very good literary agent, but game. And this was 1 week of queries. She got 197 queries and made 4 requests based off of them. And a huge part of that is that they just weren't doing their research and stuff like that. So you can get like so close to there just by getting all the technical things right.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And I think for so many people, like, the idea of the query itself seems like it's not that important, because it's like, well, if my book's really good, this shouldn't matter. But if you can't even like look up what an agent wants or how to write a query letter, if you can't even put in the little bit of work that needs, then like, what is your writing going to be like? Or if there's tons of grammatical mistakes in your query, like, that's like 1 page. What's the whole book going to be like? So.
If you've never read,
there are other things like.
Sorry.
Oh. I was gonna say, sometimes I'll look at like certain things in the query, like you should include your word count, and if you're writing like a YA contemporary that's over 100,000 words, like that's pretty much an automatic. Like even if the rest of the query sounds good, it's like, nah, the book has unnecessary stuff in it. Like it's not ready.
Yeah, it's usually a sign of somebody who doesn't necessarily have like a lot of experience writing yet, somebody starting off. You also get weird stuff, like I recently read a middle grade that the writing was good, but there was just stuff that was in the middle grade that was like super inappropriate for that age category. So it was very evident that while the writer was a good writer, he hadn't necessarily done a lot of research into what children's lit, is or isn't, frankly.
That's a big one I see with self-publishing, of like, not necessarily with books I work with through NetGalley, but just a lot of discussions of people who want to write and publish in YA who do not read YA, and it drives me crazy. Like, I feel like every year something happens that makes me want to do a video on this.
Yeah.
I've done a couple now at least, but it happens so often. But when you ask people, they list off Harry Potter, Twilight, and Hunger Games. That's it.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing that rings alarm bells when I can tell that person hasn't done any reading, because their comp titles in the query are like, it's Harry Potter meets Twilight. I'm like, no, thank you, delete. And it's the same with people that, like you just can tell, or the ones that bash other popular YA fiction in their query, like, my book is better than Twilight. And it's just like, okay, you haven't done enough research yet, because that is like one of the #1 pet peeves of most agents is insulting the stuff that they publish.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think also an important thing in the query is, obviously a big part of it is summarizing your book and selling your book. And if you can't succinctly summarize it in the query, then it might not be a great book. You know, with exceptions, most good books can be summarized well. So
I put a link
And that's
down
not-
in the discussion section to a website called Query Shark. If you've never read a query letter, I would highly recommend you go on this website where she tears apart people's query letters and read every single post. Like, don't stop until you've read all of them, and then you will be totally
She's-
equipped to write your own
yeah.
query letter.
Janet Reed is terrifying but brilliant, and
Yeah.
you will learn things that you never thought you'd learn. Yeah, that's not to say that like writing a query isn't hard, because it's so hard. We totally understand how much it sucks. The synopsis is hard, the query is hard. It takes a lot of time to, it's hard to take a 70,000 word novel and boil it down into, around 250
300
words. So,
yeah.
or 300 words. Yeah. Don't despair. Like, it's possible, but it's not supposed to be easy.
Yeah.
Are there any other?
Well, and I think query writing, like any other type of writing, it's a learned skill, and if you do it more, you get better at
Yeah.
it. Not to say that it's ever like easy, but I know
I still hate it.
I'm more comfortable with it now than I used to be, for sure.
Mhm. And you know what? It doesn't stop either. Once you are ready to go on sub, I'm sure people have discovered this, certain word nerds, that you have to write the back cover blurb, essentially. And it's kind of like a query.
Yeah.
So that never really goes away. And then once you sell the book, then you have to write the actual back cover.
Yeah.
So you just,
And I was going to say, like, writing the query is great practice anyway, because you're going to need that synopsis, because everyone, once you get published, is going to be like, what's your book about? And you don't want to, like, talk to them for an hour telling them the entire plot of your book. So gives you some practice at knowing how to describe your book to someone in a few words.
Yeah.
Anything else on the query front? I'm not sure how to lead this conversation. So any other realities you want to begin with?
We have a question. How many rewrites or rounds of revision should I do before querying?
As many as you need. That's not a helpful answer, but it's the right
But
answer.
it really depends on the book and the writer, and how
Yeah.
much you change with each rounder, because some people do one huge revision and other people tackle it of like a part at a time with each round.
Well, and if you're like me and you write really, really, really bad drafts, but you write them really, really fast, then you might be doing a lot of rounds of revision. I'm currently on like round number 20 on my work in progress.
I don't think
So-
there's any like one answer, because it, like you guys said, it really depends on your style of writing. Like Kyra was saying, she writes bad drafts. I usually do write bad drafts, so it'd be like 4 rounds of revisions after that. But the one I'm writing now has been like, I wrote out a synopsis first, which I discover I then end up writing a cleaner draft, and probably I'm only going to need I'm only going to need about 2 rounds of revisions, probably, I'm estimating, right? So it's completely different, and experimenting probably is the best way to go to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
And it's different once you have
Well,
an
it might
agent
not even
too.
be the same for you for every book.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like sometimes your draft is clean, and sometimes it's going to need a lot of work.
We had a second question about word counts. Dark Deluxe Full said, I've heard that a YA novel should be 80,000 words or less. Is that true?
So if you're writing fantasy or sci-fi, you can 80,000 is like the sweet spot. Like 70 to 80,000 is like a good place to be. You can go up to like 100K. Usually 100K is like where agents will be like that's the cutoff point.
Yeah.
Where if you're over a lot of people, it's like an automatic no.
Yeah.
But that is different.
Yeah,
for
you have a little. Yeah. Oh, self-publishing.
Yeah.
You
And
got more wiggle room.
and under 70, you're getting closer and closer to novella territory. So.
I think it depends. Well, yeah, with middle grade for sure. With YA for sure. With middle grade, you can go closer to 45, 50 type of thing. But yeah, for YA, you have a wider range, especially if it's sci-fi or fantasy.
Yeah, and this is definitely something that's very different in the self-publishing world now. There is a huge range. There are a lot of people selling very, very well, writing 30 to 50 word. They're generally called shorts, and publishing them more quickly. So you're having almost like a serial, but they're individual stories that are just told more episodically and faster. So it's not the full span of a novel, but you're getting more into a series in a shorter period of time. But there's also people publishing epic, massive books. So there's more room to play with what works for your story there.
Yeah, see, and I love that. I love the idea that a self-publisher can take something and like call it like it's the guys that write publish repeat book. I can't remember their names, but they call their work seasons and they release them in episodes and they're just these little blips and you can release them like every week or every month. Or I love that idea. It's such like, you know, it's creative and you hook people on these things, charge 99 cents and a new one comes out each week, you know, so you've got so much room to play with stuff like that.
Yeah.
I definitely say in any realm of publishing, like just be wary when your book is really long, because even if you can publish that in self-publishing, do you need to publish that book that way, or do you just have, or is there just too much going on in your book, or it needs to be split into 2 books, or
that's generally the
too many
advice with big
subplots?
self-publishing books.
Yeah.
Is
Why
split it
is
up.
it that long?
Make sure you're having a concise story in each
Mm-hmm.
part of it, but split that book up.
Yeah. Even for like having edited or beta read, I should say, other people's high fantasy, not YA necessarily, but adults, like a lot of it is spent on, if you're not careful, on the landscape and what the sunset looks like. And like, there's just, you don't need 6 pages of that. And if you're finding that's why you're running into the, 120,000 words, you should probably cut some of it. Because I mean, it is a Lord of the Rings, that's the way it was, but people generally have a little bit less of an attention span these days.
Yeah, exactly. Or like all the random subplots that aren't actually important to the story. Yeah, if you could cut it out without damaging anything around it in the story, it probably means it doesn't necessarily need to be there. A plot line, I mean. Yeah.
All right, good to move on to our next topic.
Yeah.
All right. So, I'm thinking we're going to talk a little bit about what to expect in terms of timelines when you are publishing. And this is somewhere else where I think there's going to be a big difference in self-publishing versus traditional publishing, but we will start with traditional because waiting seems to be pretty much the existence of a traditional published author as far as I'm concerned.
Maybe just don't have time expectations if you're going for traditional publishing.
Every stage is going to take a long time.
Unless it doesn't, because sometimes it doesn't, and that happens too. But
though.
maybe just expect it to.
So when we're saying a long time, what are we talking here?
Well, for what?
It
depends what. Well,
let's start with query.
Yeah, we can
start with queries.
Expect months. I mean, like as a query. Yeah, well, hopefully not. I mean, for how long in general it takes, or for how long individual agents reply to queries, because it shouldn't take years.
We'll say individual agents, because how long the querying process takes
can be
it's so individual. Yeah. So, but like even just the process of sending a query letter out to an agent, you could be looking at months. Yeah, 3 months is usually at the point where I would say, hey, you can probably nudge that agent, which just means send a reminder email like, hi, I sent this email, or I sent you this query letter. I'm wondering if you had a chance to look at it yet and if you were interested. And so 3 months is usually like at the point where you can just start getting impatient and wondering what's happening. And that seems like a long time, but it's not in the industry.
Yeah. And that's also something to make sure you're like paying attention to the agent's website, because some agents will say, if you don't hear back within 3 months, just assume that I'm saying no. So you should, because don't reply to everything.
As far as nudging is concerned, you don't nudge on a query letter. You would only nudge in a situation where they have asked for materials from you, like if they read your query and your sample pages and they were like, hey, I like this, I want to read 50 pages, or I want to read the full. And even then, it's super important that you do your research, because for some agents, they don't want you to nudge them because they have their inbox set up a certain way. So if you nudge, you knock yourself all the way to the bottom of their list. And so you want to make sure you're really thorough before you do anything.
That's another thing I think, aside from publishing is all waiting, that you can take, is that excuse me, publishing is also very much about reading people's guidelines. Anything and everything to do with querying, read everything you can on the agent's website. Because yeah, stuff like that's really important.
Yeah, and there are agents out there who they still have my full from a year and a half ago. And that's like with nudges and stuff. So sometimes they just keep it forever.
Yeah.
And it's just because they get a lot of amazing material and they're busy and like it's easy to want to be bitter about it.
An entire year, I think it was a year and like 5 months or something, I got a request for my full manuscript. And this is a year and a half after I got an agent. And I was like, wow, why did you bother? So that should tell you something.
All right. So going on from there, we'll talk a little bit more generally, because this is something that a lot of us have researched pretty thoroughly. But what are you looking at in terms of timelines between getting an agent and starting to go on sub, which is having that agent try to sell your book to publishers?
That again is super subjective. With my first agent, I've often haven't talked very much about this because I've been through 2 agents now. The first agent and I, our communication style did not click. He wasn't a bad agent. He sold lots of great books, but we just didn't click as a client and an agent. And that's something that actually happens quite often. Most of the authors I know have been through 2 agents. But with ours, because he was so backlogged and had so much to do, it took us like 2 years to edit the manuscript. But I don't think that's technically a normal length of time. My second agent, it was, I think, 2 months.
Yeah.
Or like a month and a half. So like usually it's pretty soon afterwards, but it does depend on how much of an overhaul you're doing on your manuscript.
Yeah, and agents too, they take into account your life. Like I have friends who are lawyers, who have full-time jobs, who don't have as much time as like Erin or I do, where we can like drop everything and focus on the edits.
Right, full-time.
And get it done. And so for them, it takes longer. And so you guys are partners once you have an agent. You guys work together and find something that's going to work best for both of you.
And there's usually not like an immediate drive. Like there's not like we have to get it out now. I think it's good to not wait too long, because a lot of the time, like my agent will be like already on editors' doorsteps talking to the editor like, hey, I have this, like I'm going to go out with it soon. Are you interested in this? So in that case, yeah, we would be trying to get it out pretty quick so the editor doesn't like forget about us essentially. But if you, like Megan said, are, you work full time, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you have kids, you don't have a lot of time, and your agent will take that into consideration. And there shouldn't be like, it doesn't have to be immediate. It can be like 3 or 4 months, longer.
We've got Ellie in the comments, who is also agented, who said, I got my agent a year and a half ago and I'm still editing, but my friend signed with her agent, went on sub, and sold within like 3 months.
Yeah.
So it can be really variable.
Super, super different. And, it depends, like I said before, like your agent also is crazy busy. He or she probably has like, they could have 6 to 15 clients and, a dozen different things they're trying to do all day. So like it does take them a while to get back to you sometimes as well. So it's something to think about as well. That's also something to think about when you are looking for an agent actually, is how many clients they have. Like how much of a priority do you want to be? That's not to say agents that have a big client list are going to like ignore you or anything, because that's not the case. But that was something when I got my second agent that I looked into a lot, like how many clients does this person have? How busy are they going to be? That's also what I talked about mainly when I had phone calls with the offering agents, other clients, like how responsive are they? And the agent that I ended up going with was super responsive. Like all of our clients said, oh, she gets back to me immediately. And that was one of the huge selling points. And one of the reasons I'm so happy with her is because it's like the next day she'll email me back, right? So
yeah,
reality. Thought I'd add.
Anything else on traditional publishing timelines you guys want to add?
Well, for timelines, another thing that struck me is that it goes really, really slow, like we said, until it happens all at once. because when you've got something like going on sub is such a weird thing that happens, because you, like Megan said in her WordNerd video, it's a business. And so you wouldn't go around talking about job interviews. Oh, I was at this job interview and this lady said this, because you don't talk about it online because that's super unprofessional. And sub is the same way. Yeah, if you want to go watch Megan's video on that. What was it? Yesterday's video?
Wednesday, I believe.
Wednesday's video. Yeah, it was a good video about that, a little bit about that. But when it does go to sub, if there's a lot of interest generated, it can happen immediately. So it can sell the next day, or it can get an offer the next day. And then if you get that offer, the other editors are then notified, and they will read immediately. So you'll go from the bottom of their list to the top of their list. They'll read in like as quickly as they can to see if they want to put an offer in it. And that's when it can sometimes go to what's called auction, where they basically put in different bids and essentially fight over your manuscript, which is, you know, the perfect position to be in, fingers crossed. That is an ultimate goal as well, right? But that's when it can happen super fast.
Yeah.
Or if someone put preliminary. Okay, I can't speak.
Preliminary.
Thank you. Yes, when they put in an offer and say like, I want this. This is the offer. Don't sell to anyone else. And that's when it can happen in like a day.
Yeah, I will say that is not the norm, though.
No.
More likely
Don't expect that to happen.
for it to happen and still be considered quick. You're looking at 2 or 3 months. And that would still be getting a book deal quickly after you go out on sub. And it can vary by genre too. Like I have a friend who writes women's fiction, and she like realistically is looking at least a year on sub before getting a book deal.
And sometimes just like querying, it might end up having to be a different book that you sub in the end. I know Veronica Roth originally, like she got her agent with a different book that wasn't Divergent, and they tried to go on sub with that, and none of the editors were wanting it. And so then her agent was like, well, do you have any other books we could maybe work on? And that was when they decided to try and sell Divergent instead. So
that's certainly a hard reality as well, is that many times, like I said, many of the authors I know have been through multiple agents. Also, many of the authors I know have been on submission multiple times. A lot of the time your book doesn't sell the first time. My first 2 books didn't sell. I've been on submission like 3-4 times now. So like, and there's like this whole chat, I have to keep my mouth shut because I'm not allowed talking about certain things. Eventually I will. This whole chat is frustrating for me. I think it's suffice to say that I've been on my latest round of submission was a good thing, and that's all I'll say. But I have been on multiple times, and I've written multiple books that have, not sold. So that's another reality that once you've made it, you haven't necessarily made it yet.
Just because an agent loves your book, it doesn't mean that a publishing house is going to think it's right for them. So.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really good to be aware of, because many authors aren't. Many think as soon as I get an agent, I'm there, I'm published, I'm on my book tour. But it's good to know, it's just good to be prepared. And I don't want to say like, oh, doom and gloom, but you know.
And that's why it's good to keep writing and working on new books, because if that one doesn't sell, you need something else that you can pull out and start working on. So.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say. I think we all have this tendency of like, I don't know, for me, the most exciting book is always the one that's like, I'm working on right now that I'm really proud of and it's really shiny. And it's always really easy to have a tendency to think like, this is the one that's going to like make me. And like, it's good to kind of get rid of that mentality of like, maybe this book will be sold. Maybe it'll do great. Maybe it'll be the next one, you know?
Yeah.
Or maybe it'll be the last one that I'm tired of and don't like think is good, but actually is, you know?
That happens a lot, I feel like.
I'm putting some links in the discussion right now for further reading if you want to know more about the submissions process. One is just an article that's like start to finish what happens when you go on sub, and then there's going to be a set of podcast links to the Pub Crawl podcast, where J.J. Jones, and I can't remember the other person's name, but they're published authors. One is an agent, like they've been through it all, and they talk about the realities of the rejection that comes with submissions and all of the different processes and how much time you can expect it to take, all of that. I feel like it is a must listen or must read, or musts, if you're trying to get a realistic mindset of what's to come in that regard.
Yeah. Pub Crawl has been like my constant companion when I've been like cleaning the house and stuff. The podcast is so good.
Yeah.
I
And
love
I guess
it.
the one like traditionally published timeline thing we haven't talked about is even once you sell your book to a publisher, you're still going to be waiting for it to be in stores or to be on sale. Like it's usually about 2 years after you
that's
sell.
potentially the longest wait of all of
Yeah.
them.
You still have rounds of revisions and cover design and just lots and lots of stuff before your book can come out. So.
Well, and then I think usually you get to a point where you're kind of done with what you do, other than like you're doing some marketing stuff, but a lot of it's like, you know, going through the designer, and then you're just kind of sitting
Start
there
working
like,
on your next book.
Still waiting. Yeah. Always be working on your next book.
Yeah.
So that's where in the self-publishing world, like it's so hugely different right now. The pressure right now in a lot of the groups that I'm in where people are looking to do this professionally and make an income from it, and a lot of people are doing that successfully, the pressure is to publish quickly. That in that 2 to 3 month time span where you're waiting for an agent, people are starting a book, editing a book, and releasing a book. So looking at 4 books a year, or sometimes a lot more. So it is very, very different there right now, which is definitely where I'm more comfortable. I hate the waiting. I hate having to wait for other people to have time for you when I have time for me right now. So.
Yeah, and I think it's such an interesting difference that like with traditional publishing, you need to be patient and you need to be able to wait. Where like self-publishing, you actually need to be able to work quickly.
Yeah,
and
you need to be able
out
to
faster.
regulate yourself and like stick to your own deadlines.
Yeah.
I've also seen a lot of articles recently about with authors saying it can't be done, that writing more than a book a year is impossible, or it's clearly crap.
That's silly.
Whereas so many authors now are like, you are writing one book while your editor is going through another one, and your proofreader is going through another one, and you're getting covers for an entire series before you've even written them. So it's just a very different mentality, and a lot of it is having to set your own deadlines and hold yourself to them, and you're just doing more of that work that is spread out over a long time with traditional publishing, because you're waiting for other people and you're compacting it into a much shorter period of time.
Yeah. And I think in self-publishing, it's so important to move at a faster pace and get things out, because then you're staying fresh in readers' minds. Like if they can read your book and find out, well, in a few months, the next book is coming out, then they're less likely to forget in between books.
A big part of it is staying on Amazon's hot new releases thing. So that's 1 month to 3 months. And like every time you're hitting one of those deadlines, you're getting less traction on the Amazon store. So if you have that next book ready to go, it's going to boost all those previous books back up, because you're getting in front of new people again, getting on those new releases lists, and they're saying, oh, there's already book 1. And a lot of readers aren't reading books until there's multiple books out in a series, because a lot of those readers who are really fueling the self-publishing industry are reading a ton of books, so they want those series they can binge right away. So authors are trying to accommodate for that, and it's just an entirely different world right now, probably more than it has ever been. So
yeah,
like that Bell Forest author is publishing like every 3 weeks or something.
That's crazy.
Dang.
See, I do find that the divide between, because I want it, like I said, I love to be a hybrid author, but I do find the divide between the two of them to be somewhat disconcerting. Because like I write fairly fast, but I like to be able to take my time in between books, and you cannot do that in traditional publishing as much, but at the same time, I don't necessarily want to let that stop me from putting out books that I want to put out in whatever way I want to put them out. I'm just not expecting necessarily to have this huge career taking off right away, right? Which I think you can do if you're doing both. You can take your time a little bit more.
Yeah. And that's
At least
where some
that's
of the
my
advice
approach.
you'll see in the self-publishing world will be, take all of the time you need, write that trilogy, and don't start publishing the first one until you're close to having the third one finished. So you don't have to rush yourself.
Right.
Not
right.
starting. And that's not something everyone agrees with, because you can get that first book out and it can start getting fans to increase your sales when the book 2 comes out. So there's so many different ways of going about it, but
Yeah, my situation is a little different because the other one's still up on the first book one is still up on Wattpad, and it's still continually going up and down the lists and stuff. So that's a bit different. But. Oh, Kelly Van Sant is the other one who's on the on the Pub Crawl podcast.
Yes.
JJ and Kelly.
Yeah. If you are someone who is trying to decide between traditional and self-publishing, if you go to our website, wordnerds.com, we have a section on traditional and self-publishing. We have lots of videos there with lots of reasons why you might consider one way or another that we probably don't have time to get into all the details of tonight. So definitely go there, wordnerds.com, publishing heading.
I'm already feeling like this chat definitely needs a post. There are still so many things I want to cover.
Yeah, we might have to have like part 2 of this sometime.
Yeah.
So
we had a question. How long should one wait after sending out queries before considering self-publishing?
I
would say that is not a one thing or the other thing.
Thank you.
That if you want to query, if you want to self-publish. Don't self-publish because, and you can self-publish because traditional publishing didn't go the way you wanted, but I wouldn't plan it that way. Look at which one is best for you, and keep querying if that is what you really want. Tweak your query the next book, or if you want to get that book out there, look at that as a viable option on its own, not as this didn't work out.
Self-publishing is not a last resort, and it irritates me when people say this, because not that this person's saying that, I shouldn't say it like that, but a lot of people do look at it that way, and it's not, because it's not something you just throw up there and leave. It's like a lot of work, and it's something you should be planning for.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I was gonna say, I think this is part of why it's so important. This kind of like touches on what we talked about near the beginning of the chat, but it's so important to know whether your book isn't getting any traction in the traditional publishing world because it's not the right time for that, like it's not the right trends and the right genre and everything, or if it's just because that book isn't ready or your writing isn't ready, because then you're still not really doing yourself any favors self-publishing it, if that's the reason.
If it is the trends thing, then that is where I would absolutely consider self-publishing. If doesn't work out. Because like that Bella Forrest author who I keep mentioning, she's writing vampire fiction. That is where she is selling all of her books. And she is still riding that Twilight wave because the traditional publishers aren't putting out books in that area anymore because they know they're not going to get the next big hit. But there are still readers who desperately want more vampire books. So they're finding them in the self-publishing world because the traditional publishing world isn't investing in them right now.
I would definitely say don't resort to self-publishing because just one book hasn't been successful with querying. Like keep trying with different, write another book and try another book, because it may just be that book, or it may just be that you're not at the right point with your writing yet and you need to improve your writing more.
Yeah.
That being said, if you are querying and you're getting a lot of requests, it's going really well, and the feedback is unanimously, like all the agents are saying, this is perfect, but I can't sell it.
Yes.
Then I would say, yeah, you can consider it, but the timing for that, I would still say you need to wait at least a year and a half. And once you've decided to pull it, you're not going to query it anymore. You need to email any agent that you haven't heard from and be like, hey, I know it's been a while. I queried you on this date. You requested on this date. I just wanted to let you know that I'm withdrawing it from consideration. Thank you so much for your time and interest.
Yeah, that's something that I'm seeing some author friends do is, and it's not because they're like, oh, I give up, I'm going to go self-publish. It's because they've got these great books, they've got all this amazing feedback, but the agents, like we said, are saying, I don't know how to sell this. I don't know where it fits in the bookstore. It's too niche, right? Those type of feedback. So it's not that the writing's bad. It's not that the book is bad. They just don't know what to do with it in the current market. So that is the time where you could say, well, maybe this will work as a self-published title, because it's not a last resort. It's just a different.
And that's where you start researching self-publishing. It's not like you still want to put in the effort to make sure you're successful.
See if it's right for you.
And I do think in self-publishing, knowing what the trends are and how other authors are being successful, you have more control over your own success with self-publishing. Like, it's not just putting it out there and hoping that the trends are right and your publisher is going to fully support your book. You have more of control over what happens after you're published, but only if you're doing the research on how to make that work. It's not going to happen on its own. Like, it's more likely to happen on its own traditionally publishing than.
Yeah.
Yeah, because self-publishing is an incredible amount of work. It's definitely not like a last minute, last resort type of thing. It's a whole career.
Yeah.
And self-publishing and traditional publishing both, like, eyes wide open, you're not going to be making a ton of money either way, most likely, particularly when you first get started.
Yeah.
Apparently we had a question we missed about organizing an agent search, how to organize an agent search.
Yeah. Spreadsheets.
I used Excel. Yeah, do make sure you're writing down every agent you query so that you don't query them twice with the same manuscript, because that's
Because you think you'll remember, but you won't.
Yeah.
You won't.
I know Susan Dennard has a good post on her website about how she used a spreadsheet for it. And it's a really good organized spreadsheet, so you can read through that. And she talks about what kind of information you should have in there and
how to use a tier system. Yeah. Yes.
Definitely.
Lots of good internet articles about that. And yeah, Susan Dennard's website in general is just great for everything publishing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a great post she did recently on her reality of publishing, which is kind of what inspired this topic for me. But I don't know if we really made it there in our discussion yet. Like, there's still time.
I think we can talk about, because we've kind of talked about getting published, but it's like, once your book is published, what's the reality? And that's really what her post was about, was after publishing, how still it's not all like you'll notice none of us said that our like publishing like success idea is just like getting a publishing deal, because that's not, there's still so much that can go wrong after that.
Yes.
It sounds terrible, but like
it's so true. It's so terrifying though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read the post a couple weeks ago now. Does anyone have easy access or can summarize from memory?
I can summarize from memory. I'm assuming Megan maybe has a link to that one ready too. But yeah, so basically Susan Dennard talked about, if you aren't familiar with her for some reason, so she published Truth Witch, which was very popular, made it into the New York Times bestseller list, but that wasn't her first book. She had a trilogy before that, which is Something Strange and Deadly, which got a pretty big advance because it was steampunk, and at the time publishers thought steampunk was going to be big, but it never really was. So she got a big advance, and then the book is considered a flop. Like, that's what she talks about in her article, is that really it is considered a flop in publishing, and it didn't do very well. And so with publishing Truth Witch, she knew that it was kind of her like last stand in a way, because if Truth Witch did not sell well, then she knew that if she wanted to continue publishing, she would have to publish under a different name. Because that's what happens in traditional publishing, is if you flop a couple of times, they want you to publish under a different name so that it's not associated with the flopped books. And she didn't want to have to change her name. So Truth Witch was very stressful for her because of that. And then even one of the realities she gets into with that too is that Truth Witch has done really well. It reached the New York Times bestseller list, but she still hasn't earned out her advance, which wasn't very big for that one. She still hasn't earned out the advance, even though she's a New York Times bestseller. So
yeah. When we talk about earning out your advance, I put a link in the discussion as well to a Pub Crawl podcast about advances and royalties. But to earn out your advance, they're counting that in like how much you're making off of royalties of a book.
Yes.
So it's like your percentage of royalties has to equal the advance check. So say you get a $10,000 advance for your book, which is pretty good. You're going to get $1 of royalties off of each book, because they're going to take all of their chunks out that go to the cover designer and the editors and all the marketing people. And so that means that you personally have to sell like 10 your book before you have earned out your advance. So it's not like 1,000 because each book is $10 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you don't see any of your royalties until after you've earned out in advance. So you have to earn the money. They're like giving you like an advance check. That's why it's called an advance, saying like, we expect you to earn at least this much. So so once you've sold those, 10,000 books, then after those 10,000, you start actually getting your dollar per book. So.
I think that would also be something interesting to talk about. I don't know if we would do it now or in a part 2, but expectations of advance, because I think a lot of authors go into it.
I wanted to do like a whole chunk of this on like income. So advance to like what
Let's
writers
do it.
make, but definitely.
Well, PubCrawl
What I'm
also
getting is
talks
we just
about,
need a part 2 of
we
this.
do need a part 2, but PubCrawl also talks about this as well. And what I love about PubCrawl is that they don't beat around the bush, because so much of the time when you look up, like, it's like trying to find something like a needle in a haystack when you look
Just
up
talking about
actual
money
numbers.
and income is so taboo in our culture.
Yeah, but it's frustrating because you don't want to go into this thinking, like, it reminds me of the scene in Jane the Virgin where she gets this book contract and she goes, $50,000, and she like throws up her papers, and her dad's sitting next to her and he goes, $50,000, that's all? And she's like, that's all? And it's just, it kind of made me laugh, because $50,000 is a very big book, very, very big for one book. It's huge. Half of that is a very good advance. Like Megan said, I think I looked up an average YA book advance, and it was something like around 10. And that's like considered quite normal. But I didn't find that until I was looking at the until I was listening to the PubCrawl podcast. They're the first people that actually, kind of came up with some general numbers, and it's different for everyone, but it's good to have like a baseline for your expectations going into it. So you're not like, where's my $50,000 advance? I must suck. No, you don't. $50,000 is unusual,
Yeah. And in addition to that, when you're traditionally publishing, you have a lot of that money that has to go towards other things. So they gave an example that I'm just going to kind of read off, because they did the math and I don't want to math. But they talked about, so in this example, nice round numbers, say you sold 3 books. That is an amazing deal, like $100,000 for 3 books. You're going to get half of that, or a third of that at signing, a third of that on delivery and acceptance, which is when you've like finished all the edits and they're like, yeah, this is good, we're gonna do this. And then a third at publication over the 3 years. So say on signing, you're gonna get 33,000. And then you'll get 111 after that. But you're also going to have to pay your agent a 15% commission, and you're going to have to pay taxes. And so really you're looking at like less than $10,000 a year after you've gotten this initial book deal.
That's why
so
it
don't
reminds
quit your day job.
No, and it's so funny because that's what happened in the show Jane the Virgin. I mean, that's mild spoilers, but she gets this book deal and she's like, I'm gonna quit my job. And right away when I was watching the show, I'm like, nope, don't do it. She quits her job before she looks at the contract properly and realizes, oh, I'm only getting like a certain amount, like Megan said, on signing and then on delivery of my first edits, which could be like a full 6 months to 8 months later, right? Like it could take a very long time. So you can't necessarily quit your job. I will never forget, I love Brandon Sanderson. I love watching him on YouTube. He does these classes that he's put on YouTube. But he said, oh, if you can, when you get your first advance, quit your job. And I'm like, who can afford to do that? Most people can't, right? So it's good to know going into it that you don't get it all in one chunk.
Yeah. And always, you're going to have to share 15%. That's like an industry-wide agent agreed. Agents take 15%. If they're trying to take more, that's not cool. You shouldn't sign with them. That's a red flag. If they're trying to take less, that's weird too. Don't do it.
It's also different on foreign sales. 20, 25, no, I don't know.
It's 20 or 25 on foreign sales.
It's been a while, but yeah, they take a certain amount on foreign sales. But foreign sales is actually a whole nother thing we could go into too, because you can make quite a bit of money as well off of foreign sales and stuff like that. And if you're lucky, you get a few of those as well. But Yeah, we need a part 2.
So do we want to wrap here then and just say we're going to do a part 2?
Do you want to talk just a teensy bit about the money for self-publishing, since we kind of went into it a little bit for traditional?
Mm-hmm.
And that, like everything in self-publishing, there is such a range. Like, I used to hear it quoted a lot that most self-published books won't sell more than 100 copies. That's probably still true, but I'm very much, now I've kind of narrowed in my focus with like the part of the self-publishing community I am most interacting with are the ones that are really researching like the promotional sides and the marketing sides and putting the money into high quality covers and editing. So I'm getting kind of a different range now of like what's possible. And something I love about the self-publishing community is how open a lot of authors have become in closed circles about how much they're making. And a lot of the most inspirational posts I see are authors who are 2 years ago, this is where I'm making. And then they'll post pictures of where they are now of like their Amazon sales dashboard of like making 10 grand a month. And it's just really inspiring to see what's possible. Yeah. And like it's not uncommon anymore. So I'm sure there are still tons of people who are not selling books because they aren't doing it. Mm-hmm. Like they're just putting the book out there and making their own cover. And and not to say that getting 10,000 a month is in any way guaranteed, but it's possible. And there are more people in that range between there now than there have been. Which is, it's really cool.
And I think different genres
seriously,
oh,
for sure.
Publishing. Like I know romance is really like successful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fantasy and science fiction are doing really well as well. The YA is still really hard in self-publishing because a lot of teenagers don't have credit cards. So they're not buying digitally, which is the biggest publishing sales.
I definitely feel like it's the self-published authors that take it super seriously and do their research and they treat it like a business that end up making a living off of these books. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I don't know. It's exciting to see where self-publishing has.
It is good. Yeah.
Like of where I could be if I continue to put in the work. It's nice. Even if I don't get there, even if I land somewhere in between, it's still pretty exciting.
I think it's, I've never understood the us versus them thing between self and traditional, because I feel like the more tools a writer has in order to make a living, the better it is, which is why I'm just like, I just don't understand why everyone doesn't do both.
Yeah, and the more people that are reading, the better it is for all of us who want to
read. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Self-publishing has been a great community for supporting other authors. Like it's very close-knit in some circles. There are still tons of people. So like not everyone is super involved, but the people who are interacting with the community are actually trying to pay it back for the ones who are being successful and help pull other authors up and share what's working for them. Like you'll see a lot of posts about like, this is how I launched my book. These are the promos I did on these days. These are how many sales I got. And so you can learn a lot just from seeing what other authors have done.
And I think that's the like great thing about publishing in general is that authors in general tend to help each other out a lot. You know, like a lot of times I think people who are just getting into writing are like, oh, you know, aren't you upset and jealous when other people do well? But I find that most authors are not like that. And because we all know that, yeah, like if one book sells and makes a ton of money, then that means the publishing house has more money to buy more books.
And more people are going to read. Yes. Like that's what Harry Potter, Twilight, and Hunger Games have really done for the industry more than anything else. Of like they got people into reading.
Yeah.
And when that happens, everybody wins.
Authors on Twitter are always promoting each other's books and everything. Like I know sometimes like the writing community has some sort of bad rap because people are like, oh, it's lots of backbiting and stuff. But I find that it's like super supportive and
normally,
and honestly, like you kind of need those big Twilight, Divergent books.
Do.
Like, I need them to do well because most people don't. Like statistically, I'm not going to earn out my first advance. I need those big books to be there because that's how they pay for all those other advances. Without Divergence and Twilights, not as many books would get published.
Yeah, that's something I was going to say. Like, I get very tired of people ragging on, like, even 50 Shades of Grey. I haven't read it. I don't plan on it, but I am still thankful that it made the amount of money for Random House that it did, because Random House is now doing well enough to purchase and make, take some of those risks on the smaller authors that really, really need, they need someone to buy
That's how
their
Scholastic was when Harry Potter came out. Yeah.
And even trickling into self-publishing, those books are setting trends that are still selling books years later.
Yeah.
We're overdue for that next blockbuster, I think, and I can't wait to see what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exciting. Gotta predict it. Maybe it will be one of us.
Yeah. And that's the thing that like a lot of publishers try to guess ahead because it does take so long of like what that next big thing is going to be. And I don't think that's ever going to work. I think something is just going to completely come out of the woodwork of like, who would have guessed it was BDSM Twilight fanfiction? Absolutely.
It's always something totally that I never would have guessed. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's part of it too, right? Because if it's something anyone can think of, then someone's probably already written it. But
Yeah.
And then there's something
like
where as
those
a reader, it's like, this is so weird, I need to check it out. And that maybe is some of what gives it its.
But it's not even like those books were completely original. Like not one of them. You don't know what's gonna hit.
Yeah.
So. But it's fun to watch and guess.
Yeah.
So are there any other questions or anything we wanted to get to, or?
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a part 2.
There's still so much more that's worth talking about.
We had a question from Marshmallow Cast asking what's a safe number of query letters you should send out.
my first novel, I sent out something stupid. It was like, I think it was like 200 query letters over time, obviously not in all one go, but it was still like, okay, you needed to shelve it like 100 ago.
Yeah. I would say if you sent less than 50, you haven't sent enough. If you've sent 175, 200, then you're looking at maybe it's time to call it.
And definitely if you're starting to like submit to agents that you really wouldn't be excited about, if you feel like these people would just be settling, you're like, well, I haven't submitted to this person who has only been an agent for 1 month and I have no idea if they're any good. Like if you just feel like,
well, that's where as me with someone with no experience in this, that would be my rule of thumb. If you're running out of agents who would actually be a good fit for you and your book, then you're sending too many.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Highly recommend a manuscript wish list for finding agents. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter as well, I am happy to share some of the agents that I subbed to. I have a huge list, so I'm happy to share it if you also write dark fantasy. But yeah, just find all of the ones that fit your book and just go for it and don't stop. Don't let the doubt catch you. It's chasing you.
I think that's a pretty good note to end on of like, this can all be kind of scary and intimidating, but it's also a lot of fun. And the more you learn and the more research you do, the more you increase your chance of success. So there's no harm in just learning more and researching the crap out of everything. And because it's all still books and book related, it still ends up being a lot of fun, and you can end up talking about it pretty much endlessly. So,
and you've got a whole community to support you, because that's one of my favorite parts still of writing is just the awesome people that you meet and that are willing to help you, like Megan over on Twitter.
You succeed.
Yes.
All right.
Any
final notes, or we're good there?
I think
don't be too scared.
Yeah. The best advice I've gotten about it is be prepared for best case scenario, but expect worst case. And if you do that, your basis.
This chat of like giving the most thorough impression of what to expect, because not everyone has gone as fully into researching the publishing world as we all do a lot. So yeah. But I do think we'll probably end up doing another chat like this because there's a lot to talk about and there's so many different facets of it that are worth knowing, so you know what you're getting into and you know what's going to be the best fit for you and you know what to expect. But for now, thank you all so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. This has been, I think, one of my favorite chats in a while. And we will be back next week with Camp NaNoWriMo Prep.
Yes.
That's the plan.
Yes.
So, because April is fast approaching, which is terrifying on so many levels. So, thank you all so much for watching. We will, of course, post videos all throughout this week and see you next Sunday. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.